A very, a very good morning, esteemed guests and participants from all around the globe. Myself, Chindu Chandran, on behalf of SRSB, welcome you to our webinar on navigating GRI standards in India, practical insights for business. As the world becomes increasingly aware of the urgent need for sustainable practices, the importance of transparent and reliable sustainability reporting has never been greater. GRI standards, recognized globally as a leading framework for sustainability reporting, offer a comprehensive and structured approach for organizations to disclose their economic, environmental, and social performance. For businesses in India, understanding and adopting GRI standards is not only a strategic imperative but also a regulatory necessity. In this webinar, we will delve into the practical aspects of implementing GRI standards in India. Our expert speaker will share their valuable insight, experiences, and best practices to help you navigate the complexities of this framework. I hope this webinar will provide you with the knowledge and tools you need to effectively integrate GRI standards into your organization's sustainability strategy. I will welcome my team member, CA Palak, to introduce our speaker, CA Kaushik Mahadevan, sir.
CA Kaushik Mahadevan is a seasoned professional with over 2 decades of expertise in ARP, accounting, and ESG. As a GRI certified sustainability professional and a dual qualified chartered and cost accountant, he blends financial acumen with cutting edge technologies like AI, ML, and ESG. Currently leading ESG strategies at 4CA Technologies, he drives business transformation and sustainable practices through data driven solutions, positioning him as a thought leader in sustainability and innovation. We welcome you, sir, for the deliverable session.
Thank you. Totally appreciate this, ladies. And I didn't get the name of the other gentleman over here. Chindu, somebody seated next to you.
Yeah.
A big hello to him as well.
Hello, myself CA Manish.
A big hello to you as well, sir.
Yes, thank you, sir. My name is CA Manish Goel, and I am the team member of SRSB ICAI.
Right, appreciate it. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Totally appreciate this, guys. I believe that, if the most important meetings, let's say from an audience standpoint, if somebody's attending on a Friday, I think, we are here to discuss, something really important is what I believe, yeah. And I believe there are quite a few participants who were already logged in, or we are expecting them to actually log in and probably, take away a few nuances around, let's say this topic that has been identified for the day, which is navigating GRI standards in India. We'll try to make it as practical as possible, giving you nuances as well as, some tidbits around, what exactly, let's say GRI is all about. But even before we come on to GRI, it is important for us, for all of us to understand that, what exactly we are trying to solve. Is it a problem in the first place? Is it a non-existent problem? If it is an existent problem, then, is the awareness, well created around us, more so from an enterprise landscaping point of view, as well as from an individual, let's say, let's say we as human beings, for example, what is our thought process and how do we take care of the planet, and let's say, a few other areas around, let's say what ESG is actually all about. I'll quickly make a move on because we have quite a few, let's say, things to actually cover in this particular session. What you see on the screen, in fact, I actually received, as recent as, today morning. I'm a part of, let's say a few of the sustainability forums, so there are like, WhatsApp groups, LinkedIn groups, and a lot of, let's say, profiling around all across. What hit me, when I look at this particular screen is the fact that, it's got a very beautiful messaging saying that, when someday everything will be recyclable. Until then, let's sort it out together. And then you see a very beautiful, let's say, provision for, let's say something to be recycled and something which says that, what is a landfill. But then eventually, what is the reality? There is a human hand, which eventually goes from, one duct to the other, which eventually gives you a feel that, when people are not taking it as seriously as it is supposed to be. This is the sad reality. This is sad but true. But eventually what needs to happen is, there has to be a very clear segregation of, what's a landfill and what is a recycle, and, how do you basically ensure the planet is actually, kept a lot more cleaner, a lot more usable, so that, let's say, the future generation is able to use the same amount of resources, that we have an access to today. Talking of which, when the image that you saw earlier, when what we call from an ESG standpoint is called as greenwashing. Yeah, greenwashing. I think if some of you understand this particular terminology, if you have come across, if you're an ESG enthusiast or if you are an avid reader, you would know what greenwashing is, right? So greenwashing is basically, let's say, more of a deceptive marketing, a deception in terms of, what you're trying to do from an environmental contribution point of view, right? Uh, when we talk about greenwashing, I mean, there are various aspects of greenwashing, and greenwashing, I mean, came into existence as early as in the last 10 years or so. And, we now are actually, I mean, probably getting to understand, what exactly greenwashing is all about. This is because, let's say frameworks like GRI have taken an exorbitant impetus along with, let's say, regional frameworks like BRSR in India, to ensure that people are getting to know about when what exactly these are actually all about. Now, the words that you see over here, I know there is an overload of, let's say, the word green. There's something called as green crowding, green shifting, green lighting, green rinsing, green labeling, a lot of greens, right? Now, fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, one, the awareness still needs to be created all around us. And the emerged markets, let's say Europe as well as USA, they have kind of taken that giant leap of faith, and they are actually way ahead in terms of recognizing all of these, as a corporate offense of sorts. Now, I'm not sure if some of you have actually heard about the great Volkswagen scandal, the great Volkswagen scandal, which actually, I mean, happened, let's say about a few years back. They came out with a very beautiful campaign saying that they promote something called as clean diesel. Yeah, but then when an assurance or an audit which actually took place, realized they all realized that they started emitting. In fact, their cars were actually emitting 40 times more than what, let's say, any of these permissible limits are actually allowed to. Yeah, so that and hence that's where let's say the birth of something called as greenwashing actually came into existence. Today, as ESG intensifies, as sustainability as a conversation actually intensifies, the whole conversation around greenwashing now is actually when branching out to, let's say, the other facets that you're seeing on the screen right now. I wouldn't want to bore you much with, let's say, this particular bit, but this is a reality. This is a sad reality of what is actually happening, and we as humans are very prone to deceiving the others, right? And I think enterprises are no different, which is exactly why, let's say, there is a huge need of, let's say, the regulatory bodies to take cognizance of this particular fact. And hence you're starting to see that there are a lot of, let's say, regional global frameworks, world leaders, everybody speaking about I mean, the importance of sustainability and ESG. With that, I hope we are actually setting the pretext for let's say today's conversation. Before that, I would love to probably introduce myself. I think the lovely lady over there already gave a snippet about me. My name is Kaushik Mahadevan. I finished my CA and CWA almost about 20 years back, and that was about 2003, 2004. All my life, I have been actually spending my time on business and technology consulting. These days, for the last 4-5 years, my focus has slightly shifted onto, the data, AI. And very recently, I'm a part of a team, which develops IPs, products and services around the ESG and sustainability scheme of things. Yeah. Before we actually start, let's say, our conversation today, let's take a look closer, saying that what exactly ESG looks like, as far as India is concerned. Everybody is actually harping about it, saying that ESG is important. But my limited experience of let's say being in this let's say industry for the last 3 to 5 years tells me that the awareness is very minimal at this point of time. And that's wherein I applaud, when Chindu and her team, and let's say ICA, SRSP, to take a lead and actually ensuring that, we are actually promulgating and ensuring that, this is percolating down the value chain in terms of awareness. Let's take a look one by one in terms of, where we are today. Yeah. From a regulatory landscaping point of view, I think SEBI is actually doing its bit. The top 1,000 companies already in India have been actually mandated to start reporting on their ESG practices and ESG strategies. The market size, when it comes to ESG AUM, is actually expected to reach about $125 billion, by 2025. The investor expectations, if you look at, in fact, regionally as well as globally, the large investors like, let's say BlackRock, Texas, Sequoia Capital, they are very clear in terms of, what they want to consider from an ESG investment point of view. In fact, they have actually, been pulled back the plug and saying that, we're not going to invest in entities or ventures unless and until, let's say, the founders are actually showing an intent around ESG strategies. Yeah. And this is a reality. I mean, none of these numbers, I've taken all these numbers from various sources, which is available on published platforms, which I'll be happy to share, probably after this particular session. The corporate adoption is actually, expected to rise, one, because of the SEBI mandate, but what I'm also seeing increasingly is that if Coke is actually, adopting, let's say, ESG practice, let's say a competition like Pepsi is actually forced to do it. I firmly believe that, what is starting off as a regulatory, let's say, push at this point of time, at some point of time, let's say in about a year or a couple of years' time, you'll start seeing organizations to do it voluntarily because, ESG, the way it is actually interwoven with the business strategies, people will start seeing the benefits. There will be tangible ROIs, over a period of time, which will push the senior leadership teams to ensure that, this is very well entrenched in their scheme of things from an operational point of view. The government support, I think India is speaking about, let's say, becoming a net zero goal. You hear our prime minister, you hear about our economic leaders, as well as, let's say, the world leaders, another spokesperson of, let's say, India, going to the world forums, speaking about this particular push. Which also means that, let's say, when you talk about ESG, if you understand a little more deeper, I think some of you I'm given to you have a good, let's say, awareness about ESG as a topic, but to the uninitiated and for somebody who's new to this particular topic, you will see at the end of it that, ESG and data are very closely related to each other, because you can have a great ESG reporting, let's say, in team, you can have great sustainability consultants, but then unless and until you have let's say a meaningful data source, which is actually adding value to the overall scheme of things from a data point of view, your ESG journey will never be actually fulfilled. Yeah, we'll see that, in the upcoming slides. Increasingly, banks, investors, and everybody's looking at green bonds. The issuances are actually crossing phenomenal numbers that you're seeing on the screen at this point of time. The ESG focused mutual funds, if you look at, let's say week after weeks, I'm actually seeing, there are a lot of, mutual funds which are getting actually floated into the markets, which is narrowing down investing in companies, which have, let's say, a huge amount of, let's say, ESG focus as such. Yeah. The government also is doing its bit, giving out incentives in terms of, let's say, companies who are actually adopting, let's say, BRSR or any other frameworks for that matter. You see access to green finance, becoming a reality. There is a drastic improvement in terms of compliance. But I think what starts off, let's say, from an ESG compliance point of view, in year zero, this needs to keep on improving over a period of time. And I don't think any organization can say that, we are completely ESG compliant, because this is like a moving target of sorts. Yeah, you need to continuously keep on improving. Which also brings us to a very important topic, saying that, the ESG is not just about environment. Unfortunately, the people who I, let's say, meet up, let's say in my ecosystem, who are relatively new to this jargon called as ESG, they feel that, अगर हमने, let's say, घर का switch बंद कर दिया, और, let's say, अगर हमने petrol vehicle नहीं, अगर हमने, let's say, battery operated vehicles use कर लिया, so, we are contributing to the environment. Yes, definitely you are. But ESG is not just about, let's say, the environment. Yeah, ESG is a lot more, which is where, when even before we start speaking about GRI, I thought it is important, for all of us to be on the same page, to understand that, E, S, and G, what exactly it connotes and what exactly it basically means in the GRI scheme of things. Yeah. I'm just spending about, let's say 10 to 15 minutes in terms of familiarizing this particular topic around ESG, and then we will quickly move on to the main topic of GRI today. Yeah? So bear with me until then. So what is ESG? Now, eventually, when you talk about ESG, I think, most of us today, we do understand the full form of, let's say, what ESG stands. It's environment, social, and governance. Very simply put, I mean, for me to summarize this particular slide for all of you, what are we as individuals or as enterprises doing today to ensure that, the access to natural resources that we have today, it's going to be the same for your future generation? What are we doing for that? Yeah, number one. Number two, when anybody speaks about, let's say, an organization adopting an environmental, social, or a governance scheme of things, what it basically means is how is the organization, or let's say, how is the organization's decisions impacting the environment, uh, the social, which is people, and the governance scheme of things. Simply put, today, I think people are speaking about the triple P theory. When I say triple P, environment is planet, social is people, uh, governance is profit. Yeah. So eventually the onus is on the organization to prove that their decisions are positively or negatively impacting any of, let's say, environment, social, and the governance scheme of things. Yeah, because not all of your decisions will have a positive impact, not all of your decisions can also have a negative impact, but the onus is on the organizations today to very transparently report and ensure that it is available for the public to actually see, for public consumption, that indeed, let's say, the organization what is actually walking the talk. So that in a nutshell is what, let's say, ESG is actually all about. Yeah. Before we move a little further, I mean, I also wanted to touch upon, I mean, how and where, let's say, the whole thought process of ESG actually originated, right? Now, there were the 60s, I mean, in the 60s, what used to happen was, let's say, the likes of Tatas, or let's say, the large conglomerates, or the large organizations worldwide, who used to exist in India as well as, globally. There was this cognizance of the fact that, what is the organization doing from a SRI point of view, which is, social responsible investing. Yeah. Now, this over a period of time, let's say, transitioned onto, something what we know today as the corporate social responsibility, which I think even today is still intensifying, in my opinion, right? UN came into the picture. UN, they have their one of their subsidiaries, one of their divisions, called as United Environment Program, which eventually, in the recent times, they have actually come out with something called as the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what are the Sustainable Development Goals? The Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, as we know today, basically breaks down, let's say, about 17 goals, into saying that, I mean, how much of it is actually contributed towards environment, how much of it is towards people or social, how much of it is towards the governance and the profit side of things. Yeah. So these 17 goals, become the pretext or the platform for anybody who's speaking about ESG or ESG reporting today. Yeah. So what you see on the screen is basically a very high level classification of that. In fact, if you go to the UN SDG website, these days, you can also see that, I mean, how every country is actually performing from each of these parameter point of view. When I say parameter, if you look at environment, for example, number 13 is called as climate action. Climate action is one of the important things worldwide, because as I said, unfortunately, anybody who speaks about ESG today first lunges on to, let's say, the environment scheme of things, which is good. But if you look at closer on, let's say, this particular infograph over here, you will see that, the whole environment piece is not the only important thing. Look at the number of, let's say, tiles that you see on the social scheme of things, which is where it tells you that, ESG, in fact, is more than environment. It is more about the people. It's more about, let's say, internally, how you treat people, what kind of racism policies do you have, what kind of diversity do you have, what is the male or female, gender parity you have, how many females do you have in your, let's say, board composition, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So again, the whole thought process is that, how is the triple P theory, taken into consideration? Again, just to remind you all, when I say triple P, I'm talking about the planet, which is the environment. I'm talking about P, which is people or the social side of things. I'm also talking about the profit or the profitability through the governance side of things. I mean, that's basically the crux of, let's say, ESG eventually. Yeah. So today we have actually come out. It's a whole 9 yards, or in fact, I would say that, I mean, probably we are still walking, let's say, the mile, and we still don't know, I mean, what mile we are in right now. But today, the whole, let's say, I mean, walk from, let's say, the socially responsible investing to something called as SROI. I think some of you would have heard about it, but I think it is a recent phenomenon where, it is now taking precedence, in the scheme of ESG scheme of things. Now, this, simply put, is nothing but the social return on investment. So today there is a whole transition which is actually happening from being, let's say, just socially responsible investing to the socially or let's say social return on investment in terms of, I mean, how, let's say, your ESG investments are actually, yielding tangible results. Yeah. I would also love to touch upon, let's say, a couple of nuances around the principles of ESG, because, I think largely over here we see today the audience is, I mean, somebody who speaks numbers, somebody who understands, let's say, finance, accounting, audit, assurance, and other stuff, right? Now, the underlying principles of ESG are, one is materiality, which is where, today I think you would have heard about something called as double materiality, because, till very recently, we accountants, we only know what is materiality for us has always been financial materiality. But today, the whole double materiality as an incidence, people are actually speaking about, let's say, the second important topic, which is sustainability. Yeah. The very crux of, let's say, ESG or ESG reporting today is, if, let's say, today Tata says that, we are very high on our ESG practices, it is not enough. They need to prove this. And how do they prove this is, they actually, collate team members, let's say, set of team members. They put across, let's say, all their ESG strategies, all the nuances, follow all the frameworks, related guidelines, come out with an ESG report, run it through, let's say, an assurance or an audit, or let's say, in any consulting agency, which means that there has to be a transparency, there has to be an assurance, and this needs to be available in the public domain. This is one of the most important principles of ESG. Today, if you look at, let's say, most of the large organizations, or let's say in India, the top 1,000 companies, for who SEBI has actually mandated this, most of their websites have a tab called sustainability or ESG. So if you go and click that, you will see that, there is going to be, let's say, a report which is available for your perusal. Yeah. The data needs to be relevant. The data needs to be consistent. The data needs to be accurate. The data needs to have, or let's say, ESG, the whole ESG journey needs to be backed up with a very tight integration, which means that, let's say, point numbers 3, 4, 3 to 5, 3 to 6, basically you're looking at a very high pedigree of, automation that is actually required, because, there is a humongous amount of data set which every organization is actually required to report from an ESG standpoint. It actually it actually encourages a lot of stakeholder engagement, which means that, there is a lot of inclusivity with which ESG as a strategy is actually adopted across the organization. When I say stakeholder, this basically talks about your internal stakeholders as well as the external stakeholders. Yeah. The whole thought process about ESG is also from a long-term perspective. That it kind of actually pushes continuous improvement. That's where earlier in our conversation I said that, at some point of time, organizations are going to start reporting, let's say, what is the tangible ROI they're able to see from a ESG adoption point of view. I think we are still about 2 or 3 years away from that, but I think we are slowly inching towards that. Last but the most important aspect of, let's say, ESG from a principal point of view is something what we call as the cyclical behavior. Now, if you recollect, in India, SEBI had actually mandated, I think, the top 500 companies to start reporting on their ESG practices till about 31st December 2023. As of today, the next 500 companies have been actually added onto it. You know why? Let's say, for example, we actually serve Mahindra and Mahindra, yeah, as an organization. Now, Mahindra and Mahindra, may be very high in their ESG adoption, in their ESG strategy. But, if we as, let's say, empaneled supplier in their scheme of things are unable to prove that, we have absolutely no clue from an ESG standpoint, Mahindra and Mahindra will be actually pushed to go to the next supplier and, pick up them as their, service provider. To that extent, ESG as a concept is going to start percolating down the value chain and ensure that, today the top rung is actually, probably, facing the music in terms of, let's say, adopting the ESG strategy. But very soon, you will start seeing this percolating down the whole value chain from an SME segment point of view as well. So it's called as the cyclical behavior of sorts in terms of ESG adoption. Yeah. Chindu, we have any questions? Is it because I saw the chat popping up?
Yeah, there are 2 questions.
Sure.
So question number 1 is, what role do technology and data analytics play in improving ESG and EHS reporting practices?
Absolutely top notch. It's a great question. I think when it comes to technology, as I said, that when it comes to ESG as an adoption, it's great to understand what ESG is. It's great to understand what role, let's say, frameworks can actually help. Now, eventually, if let's say an organization doesn't have a great data play, your ESG journey is absolutely either half cooked, or you will end up becoming or succumbing to greenwashing, because then you will end up having not having, let's say, enough data to report, or maybe you have the data but you're not able to convert that data into ESG specific metrics or matrices. Yeah. So technology absolutely important, which is why data, technology are the backbone for ESG. So let's say any organization who wants to adopt ESG as a practice, it is just not enough to actually collate a set of people and say that I mean, we are very high, these guys speak this particular language. Now these guys will be able to add justice or do any sort of value addition only if, let's say, they have automation, they've got tools at their disposal, the tools which speak the framework language, and let's say data and analytics. Again, having the capability of capturing data right from the data source in their raw format, and then convert it into, let's say, ESG measurable parameters, and then gets into your ESG platforms or ESG reporting systems. I hope that answers this question. Yeah. So simply put, data and analytics have got a huge role to play in the overall scheme of things. The next question is, yeah.
Yeah, the next question is, what are the first steps an organization should take to translate ESG principles into actionable strategies?
Excellent question. If you can just bear with me, I mean, just about, let's say about 5 or 6 slides later, I have a slide, which speaks about this. Yeah. So just bear with me, and then, we can quickly, let's say, come back to this particular question if you feel it is not still answered. Is that okay, Chindu?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Thanks. Okay, moving on. I also get, is the pace okay, Chindu? You have any feedback from the audience? Should I slow down, or time-wise we are good?
No, yeah, perfect, sir. Not yet any on the pace.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I also get a lot of questions, in terms of, whose responsibility is this? I mean, who's accountable for, let's say, ESG as a practice? It's a great question, for one. Number two, is only one individual responsible? The answer is no. What you see on the screen right now, I mean, probably just pardon me, that I didn't mean that, I mean, just to put, let's say, these designations over here. What I mean over here is the senior leadership, the finance and the finance team and the finance leadership, the operations and the operations leadership, and the whole IT department as such. Yeah. If you look at, let's say, these 4 quadrants, or let's say these 4 tiles over here, there is something for every profile that you see on the screen. There is something, when it comes to ESG, when it comes to the CEO, I mean, for him, let's say, not succumbing to, let's say, a greenwashing or a half reporting or something called as blue washing. Now, blue washing these days is like, half reporting when it comes to the social side of things. Yeah. When I say social, I'm talking about people, right? So if you say that, there is absolutely no racism issues in my organization, but, turns out, you have absolutely zero policy, or you have nothing which is actually documented, it will impact the senior leadership. Yeah. I'm probably taking the easiest of the examples over here. Similarly, if, let's say, again, going back to, Coke doing something, this will push, let's say, Indra Nui and say that, Pepsi also has to actually, take into consideration when it comes to, let's say, ESG adoption and ESG practices. Very increasingly, we are also seeing that, the finance team is being pushed to take up the responsibility of reporting, let's say, their ESG practices and ESG strategies. Because I think, the moment the word reporting comes in, we finance team, come into the picture, whether you like it or not. So increasingly, I'm seeing that, let's say in Middle East, Europe, USA, most of these countries, where there is a new job description for, let's say, any finance related role, one of the line items or a KPI or an OKR is saying that, he or she needs to be capable of, let's say, speaking the ESG language, and ESG reporting becomes one of their KPIs per se. Secondly, I mean, it's the, let's say, the finance team, which eventually deals with, let's say, large investors. So access to capital absolutely becomes relevant, right? Then you talk about regulatory compliances. Again, it's the finance team along with the legal teams, been probably ensuring that, the augmentation of, compliances and other stuff is actually taken care of. Going back to the question of, let's say, the data and what role, let's say, data and analytics play in ESG scheme of things, that is where IT comes into the picture, because, you can't keep IT away. It's like, about 20 years back, when you had a startup, you never used to think about IT. For, let's say, any company which was starting off, IT was always an extended arm. Somebody who fixes laptops, is what IT was all about. But today, any startup that you take into consideration, I mean, the first thing, let's say that you take into consideration on day one is, let's say, IT, right? So ESG again is no different today. I mean, unless and until, let's say, the IT is backed up or you have an inclusivity with IT, your ESG adoption will have a challenge of sorts, which is where, let's say you see a huge amount of automation which will be required, which in the short term might look like a huge investment, but over a period of time, you will see that will start yielding results from an ESG standpoint, leading to, let's say, better data security, better compliances from an IT standpoint, IT efficiencies and other stuff. Lastly, the operations team obviously, is always questioned in terms of, what are you doing from a resource efficiency or utilization point of view, right? Now, the whole practices around, let's say, ESG pushes, let's say, operations to adopt ESG frameworks, adopt ESG guidelines, and ensure that, it is well taken care of in their overall scheme of things. Large organizations, these days have started appointing chief sustainability officers. But I think, by the time you start seeing this becoming a reality, I think, we are still about, let's say 2 to 3 years away, where you will start seeing a whole full-fledged sustainability team also, figuring in this particular quadrant, which is why right now it is small. But to summarize this particular slide, the accountability lies with the senior leadership, but majorly the responsibility of, let's say, filing the reports, going through the whole 9 yards, ensuring that frameworks are being followed, ensuring that you speak this particular language in a team which doesn't have, let's say, the sustainability department or a sustainability speaking officers. The finance team is actually, taking the lead over here. What is also important for, let's say, participants, let's say in this particular session, I believe, there would be some professionals, who come from audit firms, practicing chartered accountants and stuff, right? For them, again, assurance becomes, absolutely important. Now, which is where, let's say once you adopt, let's say ESG as a strategy, what is becoming or what will become even more important is every organization, today it is, let's say 1,000 companies in India, but all these 1,000 companies, it is not enough. They say that, we are very high on, let's say, ESG strategies. They can't just publish report unless and until it is rooted through a third party, which means the practitioners or the assurance or the audit teams will have to get into the picture. They will have to speak this particular language and ensure that, they are helping organizations to file this. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, I'll take a pause, and I think I saw the chat popping up. You have a question, is it?
So they are asking, as per your resume, you are GR certified. Please guide how they
Sure.
can do the certificates.
I'll talk about it. I'll talk about it towards the end of it, yeah, because otherwise I'll probably I'll start losing the flow otherwise, yeah.
Yes, yes.
What is the future opportunities for new practicing chartered accountants in BRSR or other ESG compliance? As currently only 1,000 companies are made mandatory. Great question, sir or madam. No, this will keep on increasing, because right now you're seeing only 1,000 companies at this point of time. As I said some time back, the whole ESG from a principal point of view or from a foundation layer point of view, the way it is structured, every organization at some point of time in the next 2 years will start speaking this particular language. Yeah. As I said, till 31st December 2023, it was only 500 companies. Now, as of today, there are about additional 500 companies which have been added to that particular list. I'm given to understand that, in the next 6 months, you will see an addition of another 1,000 companies probably speaking about, let's say ESG as a strategy. This will keep on swelling over a period of time, because as I said, in fact, I can give you a very real life scenario where, one of our existing customers today is facing the heat from a bank because, they're not able to avail credit, because the bank is actually asking them, what exactly do you have, or what exactly are you doing from a ESG adoption standpoint? They're not able to prove anything because there is absolutely nothing, which means that, unless and until organizations don't start proving ESG adoption, it is becoming a reality that, bankers are not willing to lend, or even if they are willing to lend, the rate of interest is actually, let's say, much higher than what, let's say, normally they would have probably charged any other customer. So the opportunity is actually immense in this particular space. We will talk about it more, as we keep progressing on this. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Chindu, am I good to continue?
Yes,
taking the
sir.
question?
We can move ahead.
Okay. I think somebody else is, if you can probably mute from your side, it will be of help. Thank you. Okay, moving on. So the sustainability reporting, I mean, even before again we get on to GRI, India has been actually on the forefront, in terms of, let's say, adoption in the last 5 years. I think this again goes back to the earlier question, I mean, where we were, let's say, between the 2000 and 2010, where absolutely, hardly few companies were actually speaking about it. Then came the CSR mandate, where, let's say, corporate social responsibility became a thing. Which eventually, I mean, gave, let's say, birth to, something what we knew earlier by SEBI's push called as the business responsibility reporting, or the BRR, which today has eventually, taken shape in the form of BRSR, which now has become, let's say, a renowned framework as far as India is actually concerned. I have a slide on, how, let's say, GRI also integrates with BRSR, so we will have a lot more clarity for the people who haven't heard about, what, let's say, BRSR is actually all about. BRSR is, let's say, the regional framework in India, which is pushed by SEBI, saying that, if you are, let's say, speaking about ESG, you will have to speak a common language, right? It's like saying that, today, if let's say, my company is actually filing its IT returns, I can't have my own, let's say, way of filing it. Like, there has to be some standardization. So to have that standardization for comparability purposes is where, BRSR comes into the picture, where it is very clearly directing organizations, how are you supposed to go about in terms of your ESG adoption as a strategy. Yeah. Moving on, the regulate. I'll quickly touch upon this particular slide, because even before we start speaking about GRI, I think it is important for all of you to understand, where exactly are we today. I think we have spoken enough about this. The top 1,000 companies, being, let's say, when being pushed to actually adopt the BRSR framework for ESG, let's say, reporting. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about, let's say, NGRBC. NGRBC is basically the national, I think, guidelines for responsible business conduct. Yeah. Now, they again are actually, pushing organizations at various intersections of their, let's say, existence, pushing them and ensuring that, they start speaking the whole ESG language. The NGRBC is a very underrated organization. I'm not sure how many of us really know about them. But they are actually working very closely with large organizations, trying to push and ensuring that, this takes some shape from an ESG context point of view. The CSR law, I think, most of us are actually aware, but today CSR is actually, thankfully, is actually impacting 25,000 plus companies. India aims to be, let's say, net zero by 2070, driving stricter carbon tracking across scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. I'm not sure if all of you understand what scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 is, but towards the end of it, I'll touch upon, what exactly this is all about. The whole circular economy push. Again, let's say, industries like plastic as well as e-waste. Today, there's a regulation called as EPR. EPR, I think, if I recollect correctly, is extended producers responsibility, where the push is that, the onus is on the supplier to prove that, he or she is actually very high on ESG adoption strategy, guidelines, and matrices, right? Sector specific guidelines in India, and even, let's say, globally, there is a huge push to actually ensure that, there are enough guidelines, frameworks, and sectors standardization, which is actually speaking about, how a real estate, textile, or chemical industry are supposed to go about. And these, if you see, they are the biggest contributors to, let's say, our GDP closer home in India. Yeah. The global standard integration is also important, and which is where, let's say, SEBI has taken a cognizance of what GRI is actually all about. To the people who understand what GRI is in this particular forum, and people who fairly understand what BRSR is, BRSR eventually, takes a lot of references, inferences from GRI, and then it is actually, tailor-made to how, let's say, or what should be the applicability in the context of India as a country. Yeah. A lot of renewable incentives. I'm told that India basically ranks fourth globally in terms of renewable energy capacity, which is huge. And just imagine if we keep actually getting better, this is going to really push us probably in the forefront. There's an investor pressure, as I said. You can go and actually do your own individual analysis. A lot of investors are actually pulling the plug if you don't have, let's say, adequate strategies around ESG investments. Yeah. From a sustainable finance taxonomy, I think the whole regulatory push is now ensuring that when organizations are speaking this particular language, there is a very high adoption when it comes to ESG and sustainability as a strategy. But as I said, more than regulatory, I feel that over a period of time, it is going to be a voluntary thing of sorts. I'm not sure again how many of you have really heard about something called as CBAM, which is your, I think, cross-border adjustment mechanism. Because let's say if your clients, let's say if your clients or your own organizations are actually participating in large tenders or let's say large RFPs, we have known quite a few, let's say, when customers or clients of ours, they started speaking to us because they started losing out on RFPs. So there comes a straight conversation of, how, let's say, ESG adoption impacts from a tangible ROI point of view. So the push is real. And I think, more than regulatory, organizations will have to voluntarily adopt it. And I firmly believe, and I'm an eternal optimistic person of sorts. So I believe that, there is going to be a huge voluntary, let's say, adoption across India, across globally, and ensure that to ensure that the whole strategy and reporting is actually real. Yeah. Now we have understood that what exactly ESG is all about, or at least I'm assuming that you have a fair high level understanding. I think we have scratched the surface. We have learned, let's say, what ESG is. We have seen what is the regulatory positioning as far as India is concerned. We have fairly understood the landscape. We know what it is. What is it in? What do we have in it for us? We understood the principles of ESG. Now comes that the fact that okay, fine, we understand. Now what next? Yeah. Now here is where it's like again saying that we understand income tax. Yeah, but is that enough? You need to probably take up the Income Tax Act, understand the sections or the guidelines, and start, let's say, accounting in line with what the income tax requests or asks you to do. Right. We saw what was sustainable development goals. We'll just park it for the time being over here. The ESG frameworks, let's say, globally that you actually see today. There are quite a few. I'm going to cover, let's say, some of it for all of you. There is something called a Sustainability Accounting Standards Board based in Europe. Again, based in Europe, and one of the premier, let's say, sustainability or ESG reporting standard is CSRD, which is Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. There is something called as TCFD, which is Task Force Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. That is closer to all of us. We are all, let's say, in financial, or let's say, in people related to the finance as a as a profession. So IFRS is no, let's say, alien to any of us over here. Then there is something called as, let's say, the Carbon Disclosure Project, or the CDP as we call. And beyond all, is where, let's say, GRI comes into the picture from a global standpoint. All of these are nothing but frameworks. All of these, let's say, either for E, S, and G, holistically, very clearly provide you a guideline on how an organization is supposed to go about when it comes to ESG reporting. Or let's say something like a CDP, which very specifically speaks about, let's say, a few nuances of, let's say, the environment side of things in terms of carbon emissions, for example, right? So there are, let's say, environment specific, social specific, governance specific guidelines or frameworks also available. But frameworks like GRI, frameworks like IFRS, frameworks like SASB speak a holistic language, cover all the nuances of E, S, and G, and give a very comprehensive guideline of how you are supposed to go about when it comes to ESG reporting. And closer home, we have BRSR, which, as I said, that when though it is an individual, let's say, a framework on its own, there is a big alignment between GRI as well as BRSR. If you go to Google and probably search for articles around let's say how similar are they, you will get quite a few, let's say, pointers in terms of how BRSR well aligns with GRI. There are a couple of, let's say, differences, or let's say how different is BRSR from GRI. Like BRSR in terms of, let's say, reporting or a reporting year, because it's an outcome of, let's say, the Indian frameworks. It very clearly says that your reporting year, I think, needs to be, let's say, the financial year. Whereas GRI says that it can be any reporting period devoid of, let's say, whether it is a financial year or a calendar year. So nuances like that, it's a little different. But overall, if you look at, let's say, both the frameworks, they speak, there is quite a lot of, let's say, intersections between both these frameworks. Yeah. Which gets us to, let's say, the most important topic for the day, which is, let's say, GRI. GRI as an organization was established in 1997 in Amsterdam, Netherlands. You can go to this particular website, read a lot about GRI. There are quite a few certifications actually available. Some of it you might feel that it's quite technical, because unless and until you understand the ESG landscape in a better perspective, you will find, let's say, the topic or the whole certification to be a lot more technical. Yeah. I think there was a question around certification. I'll probably speak about it towards the end of it. And GRI, as I said, it basically stands for Global Reporting Initiative. What is GRI? GRI is basically a framework, a guideline, which very clearly guides the organization, saying that how are you supposed to go about when it comes to ESG reporting, right? Because you can't do on your own. You might say that, okay, environment, okay, today I have traveled this much, today I have actually switched off my electricity consumption so much, I'll take this particular data and start reporting. It doesn't work that way. You need to very specifically adopt a certain framework, declare that you have actually adopting it, and then fall in line with what the framework is actually expecting you to do. And that's exactly what framework is supposed to do. And GRI is actually the OG of sorts. It's the, let's say, go-to framework for most of the global organizations, and the adoption worldwide when it comes to GRI is pretty high. Today, I think I think there are more than I'm told about 10,000 to 12,000 organizations worldwide adopting let's say GRI as a framework. So that should give you a thought process or an indication of how high the GRI adoption is, and how intensive, let's say, GRI is basically from a ESG adoption point of view is. Now, the structure of GRI is pretty simple, yeah. Although it appears complex at first, but trust me, even I thought it is very complex. But no, the more I get to know about the subject, the more I delve into it, let's say, day in and day out, I realize that it is pretty much simpler. Now, they basically come out with something called as universal standards. They come out with something called as sector standards, which is specific to, let's say, oil, mining, real estate, hospitality, financial sectors, and so on and so forth. And then there is something called as topic standards, which is like, then broken down into a few hundred topics, saying that, how are you going to report it in terms of, the data that you have at your disposal. Yeah. We'll cover very briefly in terms of, what each of these mean, and how these are actually structured from a GRI context standpoint. Simply put, the importance of GRI is actually standardization. As I said, an organization, it is just not enough to just say that, okay, fine, I understand ESG, I'm going to report in my balance sheet from tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. GRI as a body, as an organization, ensures that the frameworks are actually well defined. They're also there to actually govern organizations and ensure that they are falling in line with, let's say, the frameworks and guidelines that they have set for people. Transparency is one of the biggest let's say, principle as far as ESG reporting is concerned. So GRI again is not very different. And as I said, more than 12,000 organizations today in over 100 countries have started actually when reporting on their ESG practices, either through a regulatory push or voluntarily. They have started actually doing this because of various reasons. Yeah. The good thing about GRI is, it continuously evolves, because, today, I think there are about 40 different industries which are already covered, but they are continuously enhancing, adding more, let's say, sectors. They're also ensuring that, if there is a sector for which they have already issued guidelines, those guidelines are also continuously evolving. Like today, for example, e-commerce industry keeps on evolving, correct? So nuances are different. implications are actually different, experiences are actually different. So which is why taking into cognizance of all of these, let's say, issues, the evolution of, let's say, the continuous updates on, how GRI needs to actually, help organizations is absolutely immense. Yeah. Moving on, before I move, should I pause? Is there any question, Chindu? Are we good with the time?
Yes, sir. There's a one question.
Sure.
Assurance word is replaced with assessment. So people are asking, what's that?
Okay. Assurance is nothing but audit, because in the ESG scheme of things, I think all the frameworks speak about assurance. Assurance is nothing but, let's say, audit of, let's say, what your customer is actually speaking about from an ESG reporting standpoint. Yeah. So assurance, I think these days, it's a big five consulting firms terminology, which I think, even the frameworks have actually started using this in their lingo of things. Yeah. So assurance is no different than, let's say, audits. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, the participant is actually concerned about. So actually, the SEBI consultation paper, it talked about that they are planning to shift the assurance towards assessment. So he's asking you, what's your view on that?
I may have to read up on that in a little more detail, because, let's say the school of thought that we actually come in from today, we are actually now taught that, assurance is more when it comes to, let's say, audits. When it comes to assessment, I believe that, let's say every audit will have a certain assessment of sorts, right? Like today, for example, if somebody is actually opening up and saying that, we have actually reported on ESG reporting, you will have to, then probably open up, let's say, how you have actually gone about, how you have conducted something what we call as, let's say, maturity assessment, and then something what we call as materiality assessment. So I think the word actually differs unless and until BRSR or SEBI has actually come out with a different meaning. Maybe we'll have to delve a little more deeper on that. Yeah. Is that okay, Chindu?
Yes, sir.
Can I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Talking of, again, GRI, we are here actually speaking about, let's say, universal standards. As I said, the whole GRI is actually broken down into universal standards, sector standards, as well as topic standards. Yeah.
Number of computers following.
Any questions?
Any resolution at the end of the year?
Any questions?
Okay. So as I said, that the whole structure of, let's say, GRI basically follows something what we call as the universal standards, the sector standards, as well as the topic standards. Yeah. Now, as you see over here, probably we'll delve in a little more deeper in the upcoming slides. The universal standards, when basically speak about, let's say, GRI 1, which is foundation. The next is what kind of general disclosures, let's say, an organization actually expected to report on. What are the material topics? The word materiality, the word material topic from a sustainability or an ESG context is basically what is material for an organization from a sustainability point of view or from a ESG point of view, right? So this again is a whole process when it comes to how you go about your ESG reporting, which we will cover in the upcoming slides as we speak. Now, the sector standards, if you see, these are some of the examples that actually took out. Like GRI, let's say 11 speaks about oil and gas, then you have coal, then you have agriculture, and so on and so forth. So what GRI basically does is, let's say every organization needs to adopt a standard guideline when it comes to universal standards disclosure. Then you have, let's say, sector standards, when it comes to, if, let's say, you or your client is basically, belonging to oil and gas, there is a very clear guideline. There is a very clear framework. There is a clear mandate in terms of how, let's say, a company which belongs to oil and gas is supposed to go about from a ESG reporting point of view. Some of you will be amazed that, I think ONGC, if I'm not mistaken, has been reporting on their ESG practices for the last 20 years, even before, let's say, somebody like a GRI came out with a, let's say, a full-fledged framework of sorts. So that's where I think, there are a lot of organizations who voluntarily are doing it since, let's say, a few years. Similarly, I think Tata Steel is one of the great names, when it comes to, let's say, reporting from an ESG practices and so on and so forth. Coming back to GRI, there are a few upcoming standards which is going to come up, which we are told in the near future. on the financial services, healthcare, textiles, construction, real estate, and so on and so forth. And these are all continuously getting updated as we speak. Then you have something called as topic standards. The topic standards are then broken down into the actual E, S, and G. So what you see from economic standards point of view is the governance side of things. Environmental standards is basically, with respect to, let's say, the planet related issues. Then you have the social side to things, which is basically people internally and externally, how an organization is actually impacting the external people as well as the internal people. So the onus is in the organization to actually report this. So simply put, when it comes to GRI, the structure is very clear. You have a universal set of standards. You have the sector specific standards, which you are free to choose and actually start report. Then you have topic specific standards, which you're seeing on the screen. Yeah, again, this is just an example. Probably if you actually delve down a little more deeper, there will be a few more nuances, that an organization is actually expected to report on. Now, at this point of time, you might have a question that, for all of this to report, some of it may not be applicable for the organization. You're absolutely right. It may not be actually applicable. In which case, again, you might say that it is not applicable in your ESG report, but the onus again is on the organization to prove that it indeed is not actually applicable. Yeah. So to that extent, you again need data. So it again goes back to that question that how data and analytics are actually important in the overall scheme of ESG reporting. Yeah. Now we have seen what ESG is. We have seen how, let's say, the landscape globally as well as in India is actually reacting to ESG as an adoption. We now are fairly, let's say, introduced to what GRI is actually all about, what GRI speaks about. Now, from a relevance point of view, although the slide is named as, let's say, why GRI is relevant for Indian businesses, I would say that let's say most of it is also relevant for global businesses. We'll probably see how and why. One is global recognition and credibility. You will see a lot of organizations in India are reporting on BRSR as well as on GRI. Why? Because there are a lot of, let's say, global companies have an eye on India, right? So when they go to their website and they see only BRSR, which is very a region-specific, let's say, framework, it may not be enough, right? You need to probably speak the global language as well. And so BRSR, to a very large extent, as I said, speaks the GRI language. So there is no harm, again, then aligning the BRSR to the GRI scheme of things from a global recognition and credibility point of view. Needless to say, investor and stakeholder expectations, I urge all of you, if you are privy to this, well and good. If not, you can probably go to, let's say, Google and check out that, what, let's say, large investors, let's say, namely, I think Texas, BlackRock, they were in the recent news, where they started pulling out their investments, or they said no to new investments unless and until the founding team or, let's say, the startup is able to prove that, they have a fair element of, ESG strategy. Transparency and accountability is one of the pillars for, let's say, any ESG adoption. GRI is no different. As I was mentioning, there is a regulatory alignment with BRSR. And again, when you adopt BRSR fairly, you are actually, covering the GRI scheme of things also. Maybe a little more, let's say, when walking that mile will ensure that, you're completely aligned with, let's say, the GRI scheme of things as well. Building a brand reputation today, I think the competitive landscape is actually pushing enterprises to ensure that they are doing it not just from a regulatory push point of view, but they are doing it because let's say a competition is already way ahead in terms of their let's say ESG reporting standards, which also brings me to one of the important case studies of again, it's a global one. But H&M, the clothing brand, they very recently, I think in the last maybe about 5 to 6 years, they had actually launched globally saying that, it's a conscious clothing line. That's what they called, that particular range of clothing, which eventually turned out after an audit that, no, this wasn't, let's say, anything environment friendly. Secondly, I think there were a lot of issues when it comes to the social side of things as well. So which is where, I think that became a huge case study. Again, probably, you can actually, take a look at H&M, Volkswagen. These are some of the very famous case studies, when it comes to, let's say, ESG or sustainability. Improve decision making, because by now I think you would have understood that there is a huge pedigree of, let's say, one, adoption of, let's say, technology. Second, the founding principles of ESG itself are well aligned with, let's say, the financial accounting principles with which we are actually brought up with. So this obviously intensifies your decision making capability. Competitive advantage, because if your competition hasn't yet adopted any of these strategies from an ESG point of view, the consumer today is a very learned individual. They know there is information available, and information travels fast today, right? So obviously, this actually obviously ensures that the enterprise is one step ahead when it comes to the competitive advantage side of things. Enhanced stakeholder engagement. The whole concept of stakeholder engagement is very huge in GRI scheme of things. It basically considers what we call as the inclusivity theory. Not just, let's say, your people internally, not just your employees, your shareholders, your internal set of department people who are running the show for you. The stakeholder engagement from a GRI context also includes the external, let's say, people, your bankers, your vendors, your customers, any other partners or any other individuals or organizations, which directly or indirectly is impacted because of you or your business decisions. Yeah. I see some questions. Chindu, you want me to take a pause?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So first is they're asking how different are GRI and IR, integrated reporting, which one is better and what is the global trend?
GRI is a better, let's say, framework. Integrated reporting, again, as I said, follows the principles of, let's say, narrowing it down only onto a few aspects of, let's say, ESG. Whereas GRI speaks about the complete, let's say, it speaks very holistically, covering all the nuances of environment, social, and governance. And again, I need to understand this question from a better perspective. Is it from a certification point of view or understanding point of view, or is it from a, let's say, somebody wanting to take up, let's say, the audit and the assurance side of things? Yeah. But the global trend is GRI is the most popular framework at this point of time. As EHS,
Next question is, manager, how the GRI helped to switch the career towards ESG?
Again, sir, madam, I think this question again delves to the fact that what exactly you are meaning to do. Now, today, I think, let's say in the emerged markets, at least, we are seeing an increasing trend that whoever is actually setting up a sustainability team, they are requesting, or let's say asking for GRI certified professionals, because as I said, this is very comprehensive. You are more than welcome to take up other certifications, but I think GRI will be more holistic, more comprehensive, and I think it's the widely accepted framework everywhere. So I think this is going to definitely help you from a career path point of view.
Next is, do we have any topic standard or sector standard for educational institutions or professional bodies or IT sector?
It is on the anvil. It is on the anvil right now. In fact, quite a few sectors are still being worked out, although the guidelines are already available. But I think a full-fledged, let's say, a sector-specific guideline, I think it is still under compilation at this point of time. Which
Next is, which GRI framework is suitable for cement industry?
GRI itself is a framework. So when you say which framework, I think GRI itself is actually well suited for, let's say, this particular bit. Unless you are actually getting into the specificity of it, we'll have to check which particular line or guideline you're actually looking at. But I would assume, let's say, the one which is applicable for, let's say, the oil and gas will be actually prevalent for cements as well, because there is nothing which is very specific to cements which has actually come out. So I think the ones which are actually particular, or let's say relevant for oil and gas, as well as, let's say, steel industries, because the manufacturing processes, if you look at, I think are very intricate, right? I mean, just like how cements are. So I think those will be more relevant from an adoption point of view. Chindu, is that okay?
Sir.
Can I continue?
So we can move ahead, yeah.
Sure. Just a time check, Chindu, because we got some more slides to cover, yeah?
Yeah, so we have 45 minutes.
Okay, sure. Thanks. Okay, I think this we have spoken enough, but just for a, let's say, a rehash, GRI is a global standard, BRSR is India specific. Currently, it is only, let's say, 1,000 listed companies. The alignment areas, again, a few aspects of environment, few aspects of social governance, and the takeaways, that you should actually have from this particular session is, both are very intricately aligned, taking care of, let's say, I mean, how your E, S, and G basically work for organizations, and adopting GRI to a very fair extent, let's say, assures that, there is a set of comprehensiveness with which you are actually, I mean, let's say, going about your ESG practices. When it comes to BRSR, it is a little specific. It is it's little India specific, right? But if you want a little, let's say, global view of things, and if you want, let's say, a global visibility per se, somebody coming to your website from an overseas land takes a look at your website and sees BRSR, he or she may not understand what exactly you're speaking about. Although you might speak an ESG language, but it is not something which is globally adopted, right? Not many would be aware that India follows a BRSR, let's say, framework. But the moment you talk about GRI, people understand, people know that, I mean, what GRI is actually all about. Now, at the same time, let's say, I think there were questions saying that, I mean, GRI, BRSR, and other stuff in terms of, how in terms of alignment and how in terms of, let's say, existence, I mean, why it is important, right? I'm privy to a few organizations, who today actually only do BRSR because, I think they're a little skewed at this point of time. They're saying that, I mean, we exist in India. India says that, BRSR, we adopt BRSR, which is perfectly fine. No issues at all. But eventually, if you look at, let's say, some of the pointers on this particular slide, there are, let's say, I mean, few aspects when it comes to global standardization, right? So you'll have to start speaking that particular language. It's very similar to, let's say, you adopting or your client adopting an IFRS, correct? There's no need for an India-specific organization to adopt an IFRS, is it? No, I don't think so, right? So it's very similar. So which is where, let's say, adopting, let's say, BRSR and having an alignment with GRI is a great combination. Why? Because, one, you are talking about consistency. You're talking about efficiency because, as I said, GRI is a little more comprehensive than BRSR. BRSR is still evolving. Although on one side, I have told you that GRI itself is evolving, and on top of it, BRSR is a very recent phenomenon, correct, in the scheme of things. Yeah, so both are evolving, but I think GRI is a little ahead because of the global, let's say, view, as well as, let's say, the nuances and experiences that they receive from multiple organizations worldwide. Comprehensive coverage, stakeholder assurance, regulatory compliances. So I think this is no different to what we have already spoken about, but I would urge that, let's say, that if there are, let's say, participants today who go out of this particular session and think about, or even that one individual is thinking about saying that, let us start, let's say, an ESG practice, for example. I think you should push your organization or, let's say, your clients to take up GRI as well as BRSR. BRSR, absolutely no doubt about it. You will have to because of, let's say, the Indian existence. But GRI gives you a comprehensive as well as a more global view to things. And I think somewhere or the other, most of the smaller frameworks keep on taking nuances around, what GRI basically speaks about. Yeah. So that's the takeaway from this particular slide. I think we have already paused for a moment. Maybe I should probably move ahead, given the time constraint that we have. Now, the question that might be looming large on your minds is that, how do we align this? What you're seeing on the screen right now is basically, let's say, I mean, how, let's say, GRI as well as BRSR speaks the same language. If you take into consideration, let's say, the environment disclosure number 302 for energy or emissions, there is BRSR principle number 6, which basically aligns with, let's say, what GRI says. Similarly, there are elements around social, there are elements around governance. At this point, I need to project a very beautiful ESG report, which ICICI came out this year. I've just taken one of their sections. I would urge all of you to please go to ICICI website and check this report for yourself. If you read through the report, you would have understood, what ESG reporting is actually all about. They have done a fabulous job in terms of, how they have gone about, one, let's say, adopting BRSR. Second, aligning, let's say, GRI with BRSR. Now, what you see on the screen is basically On the first column, the GRI disclosure. In fact, GRI, let's say the specific topic, the disclosure number, the disclosure topic, and then they are saying that how this is aligning with the BRSR, giving the page references in their report itself. So that is how high, let's say, organizations are slowly, let's say, becoming in their adoption when it comes to ESG reporting in India, aligning, let's say, two frameworks like BRSR as well as GRI. Yeah, I would sincerely urge all of you to take a look at this particular report. It's a very neatly drafted report, and it is becoming a case study for all of us ESG, let's say, students as well. We are still learning, let's say, the whole gamut around ESG. So organizations like these are actually, teaching us how you adopt and how do you keep on, let's say, ensuring that, you take this practice to your customers or your organization within and ensure that, when you become a good exponent of ESG practice. Yeah. I think I saw a question saying that, how do we go about, let's say, or what should be the steps in terms of, adopting ESG? Because by now, I think you know what is ESG, you know why ESG, you know where frameworks come into the picture, how do you adopt frameworks, or what do the frameworks speak about, specifically from a GRI context point of view. There is universal standards, there is sector specific standards, then you have topic specific standards, compile all of those, and then you have your ESG report in place. Yeah. Now, the big question is, what does an organization do after having understood all of this? What should we do next? Yeah. I see a question. Do you want me to take this now, or should I finish the slide?
So you can carry on. We can discuss in the end, maybe.
Okay, sure. So the sustainability journey, okay, the key stages. I'll just summarize this particular slide, without you going through each of these, let's say, tiles. Now, the very first, let's say, step that an organization is expected to do, although it is called as materiality review. Now, we ESG practitioners, these days what we do is something called as a maturity assessment. Even before we actually do a materiality review. Just bear with me. I know the question will be, why did you not put it on the slide? Yeah, but then just bear with my, let's say, thought process as well as what is now, what now follows from my thought process. The whole maturity assessment is actually important. We have now started realizing is the fact that there are a lot of organizations and professionals coming to us and saying that, okay, we understand ESG, we want to start. But the more we actually start digging into their, let's say, scheme of things, we realize that they're not well prepared. They're not, let's say, they have no clue in terms of what comes ahead. They have no idea in terms of what needs to be done, who is supposed to do what, because this is absolutely important, right? First of all, to understand what. Second, to understand the why. Third, to understand what sort of framework, because all let's say, all of us need to speak this particular language, and at the end of it, it is the customer who is actually running the show. We are only consultants over here, right? We can only guide them, but unless and until they have the complete understanding, or unless and until they have the entire armory with them, it is very difficult, right? So once the maturity assessment is actually done, we then come on to something called as a materiality review. Now, what basically happens in a step like that is actually you start collating, let's say, your stakeholders. Yeah, you start identifying, let's say, people. Department 1, Department 2, head of the department, who's going to do what. Put them in a nice Excel sheet. Spread out the awareness and say that this is what you're going to do. There's something called as materiality assessment in an ESG scheme of things, which also means you will have to start sending, let's say, questionnaires to, let's say, your people internally as well as externally, to ensure that when they are actually participating, they are guiding your organization and educating you, because sometimes we are the result of our own notions and premonitions, right? And they say in English that perception is bigger than reality. We think that we know something, but eventually the reality is something else, right? And that's how you define a notion or a premonition. ESG today is no different. I think 1% of the Janta is actually speaking about it, but far lesser than them really understand what lies let's say, in the whole overall scheme of things. So what is absolutely important is, let's say the materiality review, the ESG strategy. Once you have identified why ESG, what sort of framework you need to adopt, what is the success factor? I mean, the very important thing is, why are you embarking on this particular journey? Most of it or not, more often than not, I think, all of us will get only one answer: regulator push. There might be, let's say, 1 out of 100 company which might say that, I want to do it because of a, let's say, one, voluntarily, second, because, I believe in this, because the way it is actually structured, I see, let's say, a definite ROI in about 2 years or 3 years time, right? Then comes a very important aspect of, let's say, how are you integrating, how well your data sets or your data points are actually aligned? Are you ready for something like this in the first place? If not, what are the steps that you need to actually, embark on, right? Do you have a ESG webpage? This is again important. As I said, one of the pretexts or one of the most important aspect of ESG, or the founding principle of ESG, is transparency. Everybody and anybody needs to have an access to that ICICI report, which I showed to you, right? And which is why it is now available on the website. Anybody who's got an access to the internet as a common man can go to their website, access it, go through the entire report, and they have very beautifully given out the entire nuances of, wherever they are complying, not complying, the reasons thereof, how well it is then ingrained with GRI and all of those things. Yeah. Do you disclose the ESG? I mean, yeah, this we covered. Do you publish annual sustainability reports? Yeah. And then finally comes, the steps for the ESG implementation. I'm going to blow this up a little more in the upcoming slides, because it is important for all of you to understand. I believe if there are 100 people today, at least one of you will go back and start thinking about, let's say, how can we get into one, either implement ESG for your existing organization, or if you are a, let's say, practitioner, you might want to adopt this from an audit assurance assessment, whatever, let's say, you might, feel apt for you. Yeah. I'll take a pause because I thought I saw question number 3. Oh no, there's somebody. Okay. Any regulatory compliance applicable to ESG compliance penalties? Sir, as of now, no, but I'm said that, I'm told that, right now, I think it is on the rise. If you look at the emerged markets, I think if you look at Europe specifically, the regulatory compliances are far more stringent for not complying with, let's say, ESG strategies. But I think closer home, we are still far away from not complying with ESG strategies. Yeah. But I think we're not very far in terms of, having this in place. And we human beings are, at the end of it, victims of deceit, right? We don't want to follow something, unless and until somebody pushes us to actually do that. Even if then, we don't still do it, then the only thing is, the carrot and stick theory. But unfortunately, in this case, it's only the stick that is actually applicable. So yeah, I think in the coming days, in the coming times, you will see stringent penalties, stringent, let's say, non-compliance matrices, which will actually, come into the fore. Yeah.
So there's a follow-up question on GRI versus IR. So they have asked, some of the prominent companies like Reliance Industry are reported on the integrated reporting. Is there any specific reason that they are opting for IR instead of GRI?
Maybe because IR, if I'm not mistaken, is very specific to, I think, few nuances of ESG. Yeah. I'm not very, let's say, I'm not an expert on IR, so I may not be able to realistically comment on that. But if they are doing it, obviously, they might be doing it for with some specificity for some purpose. Some of the organizations, they also take up a certain framework. Like in one such case, right? Currently we are working with a very, very large customer, which I'm not supposed to disclose. They have actually picked up not GRI, but let's say another framework, because they are actually participating in a large overseas RFP. So you might have, let's say, examples or cases like these, and the other thing is, when it comes to frameworks today, again, you will be zapped, I think I only projected about 7 or 8 frameworks till now. Yeah. There are about 600 frameworks, which is actually available today when it comes to ESG. Yeah. And that's a mind-boggling number, which is also a reason why, most of the organizations are absolutely clueless, saying that, how do we go about that? Because, and that confusion is absolutely right, because, and when it comes to, let's say, sustainability consulting, you can't master all the 600 frameworks, right? You will have to go behind 2 or 3 and say that, this is what we are actually taking into consideration. This is what we want to actually profess. Yeah. So to answer your question, they might have their own reasons, sir or madam. Maybe we'll have to delve a little more deeper on that. Yeah. I hope that's okay, Chindu. Can I move ahead?
Yes, sir.
All right. What do we have next? Yeah. So the next, as I said, that we had to actually blow out the GRI implementation process. Yeah. For that matter, any, let's say, any framework that you have to adopt, more or less, I think the steps are going to be the same. So what do? You basically, as a first step, you have your sustainability reporting team, have your objectives in place, have a project plan which speaks about, let's say, the timelines and responsibility. This is very similar to what we do in ERP or any other software implementations, right? Saying that you collate, have an objective in place, ensure the team's RASI matrix is very clearly laid out, saying that who is responsible, who is accountable, who needs to be consulted, who needs to be informed. That's what is RASI matrix at the end of it, right? So something of that sorts, you will have to come out very clearly and say that this is the first step. Second is, as I said, who are the stakeholders for this engagement? As I said, there has to be one, let's say, internal stakeholder which is actually driving the entire project for you. But the stakeholder in a GRI scheme of things also implies the external people. When I say external people, your customers, your vendors, your bankers, any external agencies, your freight and forwarding, let's say partners, for example, anybody, who is actually impacting or who gets impacted because of your existence as an organization or because of your decisions, is considered as a stakeholder in the scheme of things. And again, why it is important is, this step basically follows something what we call as the materiality assessment, a very, very important step when it comes to the GRI scheme of things. I think let's spend a moment or two on this particular topic. I think very recently Chindu had actually conducted a session on this. I believe some of you might have attended, but for those who have not attended this, let me probably share my 2 cents around this particular topic. Now, the first step when you adopt, let's say, an ESG strategy, or let's say a GRI adoption, and say that I want to start, the first step that you have to do or undertake besides, let's say, defining stakeholders is engage or come out with a materiality assessment of sorts. Now, when it comes to materiality assessment, what it basically means is you as an organization might have a feeling that there are a few environmental factors, there are a few social elements, there are a few governance issues which I need to take into consideration or I need to focus on in this particular reporting quarter, half year, or the whole year, for example, right? A simplest example might be, let's say, again, ICSA coming out and saying that we want to, let's say, increase our green loans from 5% to 10%. Great statement, absolutely great. But from a GRI context point of view, the auditor is going to ask, how did you arrive at this particular statement? How did you know that this is what you have to do? Now here comes something called as materiality assessment. In this case, what an ICICI or any other organization is expected to do is to delve a little more deeper, engage, let's say, all the people internally, engage the external people, send out questionnaires to them, meaningful questionnaires, ESG specific questionnaires, asking them that how or what is their perception about what you are about to actually do. At some point of time, you would assume that if you're sending out, let's say, 100 questions, you would assume at least 50% of them are actually responding back, because you know how it works, right? Now, if based on the responses, you then start dissecting, you start giving weightages to the topic, and you then realize that what is your, let's say, the top 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 topics which you're supposed to focus in this reporting period. It might be saying that an employee might tell, let's say, the senior leadership that your discrimination policies are not really great. In fact, he would question the HR, saying that there is nothing actually that you have documented, which is an input, right? And in which case, if you have 10 employees out of, let's say, 20 employees speaking about it, you got a 50% response, which is saying that you need to focus on this. Similarly, externally, let's say whoever you're sent to, let's say, for example, your auditor, Your auditor says that you need to basically follow, let's say your carbon emission is a problem. Maybe auditor is a wrong example. Maybe let's say any other supplier or any other customer. The customer feels that you're emitting carbon emissions beyond a certain permissible levels or limits. You need to take cognizance of this particular let's say response. Now all of this needs to be collated, needs to be sensitized, needs to be understood, and then you need to come out with, let's say, a very clear statement. If ICICI does all of this and then it comes out and says that our exposure to the green loans needs to increase by, let's say, 100%, which is like going from 5% to 10%, then it's a meaningful statement, having done the materiality assessment, in which case they have realistically followed, let's say, a GRI methodology or an ESG methodology, when it comes to embarking on a ESG reporting journey. Yeah, I hope that's clear. The next thing which is going to push you is, I think, one of the gentlemen or the lady, somebody would have asked, somebody asked saying that, how important data and analytics is. Absolutely important. Because even if you have a great tool with you, yeah, the data sets are so huge when it comes to E, S, and G. You can't expect users to sit and enter all the data in the system. Yeah, if you're a smaller organization, maybe you can. But if not, you need to have a very high pedigree of automation. You need to have a very meaningful data pipelines, which is actually ensuring they are automated and they are capturing data from sources. Today, organizations have multiple data sources. Think about it. The organizations have an ERP. A mature organization might have a separate HR system. Even mature organizations, would have a CRM system. Today, we are also speaking about something called a social listening. In fact, there are a few customers of ours who want to know what their employees are actually, talking about them on a platform like, let's say, mouthshut.com, or on a platform like, let's say, LinkedIn. Yeah. Similarly, there are organizations who want to know what the customers are actually speaking about them on a platform like Instagram, on a platform like Twitter, or on Facebook, for example. These are all data points. These are all data sets. And then you have IoT devices. So if you look at the data sources today, I think any small organization today is easily sitting on at least 5 to 10 to even 15 to 20, let's say, data sources with them, which means your ESG data in all likelihood is residing in each of these data sources. So which is why an ESG let's say journey is absolutely incomplete unless and until you have answers to saying that how are you going to collect data. And just data collection is not done. Once you actually collect the data needs to be then converted into meaningful ESG language. And there are a lot of calculations, standard calculations, which I have not touched upon because otherwise it will get too technical for all of us to understand this. Simply put, today organizations need to collect the data, relevant data from an ESG point of view. This raw data needs to be converted into ESG standards, simply put. Yeah. Once it is converted, then it can go into reporting stacks. Then it goes into, let's say, any consumable layouts, from where your ESG reporting can actually take place. Yeah. Then comes, let's say, the review and assurance. Again, the assurance can always be internal in the first place. Then let's say an external auditor can always come and probably, give a double, let's say, confirmation saying that everything is actually in order. You have actually followed the processes and the procedures. You are good to go. This needs to be published, and this can actually, start going into one from, let's say, to multiple communication channels. And secondly, it can also be put upon, let's say, your website, because as I said, one of the key founding principles of ESG reporting is transparency. So unless and until, let's say, the report or let's say the data is not transparent, the ESG reporting or the organization might become a victim of greenwashing, the one which we saw earlier in the screens. Yeah, I hope this is clear. Moving ahead, let me spend a moment again, because I think, there were a couple of questions on, let's say, technology. It is absolutely important. So I hope by now it is completely understood. And it's not a one-time job, right? This is something you will have to continuously keep on, let's say, churning data. And this data needs to be continuously keep on going to, let's say, your ESG reporting stacks, so that the ESG reporting doesn't get halted and you have meaningful ESG reports coming out of the system. You need centralized data management, or let's say, more specifically, if you understand, let's say, the IT language, you need data warehouses. You need, let's say, some sort of a data bucket where, let's say, all meaningful data comes and actually resides, from where you can then push it to the ESG dashboards and ESG AI or analytics platforms, so to say. Yeah. I think there is a question. I'll just take this. Oh, there are multiple tools actually. To name a few, I think Microsoft has got quite a few tools. There are bespoke developers. There are homegrown, let's say, organizations who are actually doing this. I'm not sure if I can actually take the names, but maybe offline, if we can actually connect, we can actually speak about this particular bit in a lot more detail. As I said, because unless and until your ESG reporting is backed by a good solid data story, and you will need tools for sure. I mean, I'm glad you asked this particular question. You will definitely need tools, which has the capability to capture data from multiple sources, and which then keeps on pushing onto your ESG platforms and analytics layers. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, pause to play. Are we good, Chindu?
Yes, sir. We can move ahead. No questions
I
yet.
can't see the time here, so you'll have to tell me what's the time.
So we have 20 minutes more.
20 minutes, okay. I think that should be good enough, yeah. I did refer about, let's say, Tata in my earlier, let's say, discussions or during the course of the discussions, but they again are, great evangelizing, let's say, ESG strategies. And I think if you again look at their reports, you will see that, they are somebody who have been doing it for a few years now in terms of, integrating GRI with BRSR and all of this. I would urge that, if you are really interested in probably understanding this in a lot more detail, please go to their websites, take a look at these particular reports, and what you should do is more specifically take a look at, let's say, previous 2 or 3 years reports, and take a look at what they have done, let's say, this particular year. This actually holds true for Mahindra as well. Mahindra, and in fact, in their recent, let's say, commitment to ESG, there is a published report which says that they have demonstrated about let's say 18% in terms of their let's say scope 1 and scope 2 emission reduction, which is humongous. 18% in their scheme of things, it is not a joke. And if they have actually published this, kudos to them in terms of what they have done. But for you to understand this in a little more detail, I would urge all of you to go to their websites, take a look at, let's say, what they have done in the earlier years. Their ESG report also has actually matured over a period of time. That is when you will understand the whole landscaping. I understand it might be a little bit of reading, but that is how you learn, right? At the end of it. Otherwise, what you will see on a Google or any other source, that you might actually see may not be relevant. What I'm telling you is a real-time, let's say, learning ability or capability of sorts. Yeah. What is also important for you to understand till now, I think, we have been speaking about, let's say, GRI, a little bit about BRSR as well, how, let's say, briefly BRSR, we did speak about it, right? How BRSR actually aligns with GRI. But I also wanted to touch upon, for all of you to understand how, let's say, GRI aligns with the other global frameworks as well. Because, one of the important questions on, I think, IR or maybe even CDP that all of you have, it is important for you to understand that there is an alignment between all these frameworks as well. Today, in fact, I think the most popular, and pardon me if I have probably not included a few others, because as I said, there are about 600 different frameworks which is actually available. And today, the consumer and the enterprises are really, really struggling in terms of adopting this, which is also a reason which I feel that the adoption of ESG strategy is actually a lot more slower than how it is ideally supposed to be, because there is a lot of confusion, there is a lot of chaos around this particular topic. But I'll probably restrict this to let's say what you're seeing on the screen right now over here. I think we spoke about UN SDG. You saw that nicely stacked, let's say 17 goals, which is broken down into environment, social, governance. That kind of became the pretext for let's say what let's say ESG is actually all about, right? So to that extent, I wouldn't say they are a framework, but I think any ESG conversation is incomplete without you speaking about, let's say, what even SDG is all about. In fact, the whole GRI, let's say GRI's push came into existence because of, let's say the UN SDG initiative in the first place. Yeah. And this very well aligns with, let's say, the GRI. Why am I telling you this is? Uh, I'm a GRI certified professional. I'm sure you would have actually seen that at the start. And I think, some of you noticed that as well in your questions. Now, there is one specific module in this particular certification, which very comprehensively covers that, how GRI and SDGs are actually aligned with each other. So which means that, anybody who, let's say, embarks on a GRI journey, in a way, by default, are also aligning with SDG, which means that, when you report, when you or your organization or your customer is actually reporting on the GRI framework, you are in effect also, including and covering the SDG language as well. TCFD, again, a very, very popular, let's say, framework. But again, if you look at GRI disclosure number 305, which is climate related disclosures, it very well aligns and actually speaks about, what GRI in turn speaks about. Although TCFD very specifically covers the environment specific, the climate related financial disclosures only. Yeah. And again, as I said that, I think one of the questions that you asked about Reliance, following a certain specific framework, every organization can have their own reasoning, as to why they are actually following one particular framework. So if TCFD is actually applicable to a certain enterprise, they would actually adopt this. But a TCFD alone is not complete ESG, right? That is where, let's say, GRI comes into the picture. I hope you get the drift now. Yeah. CSRD, again, a very, very important ESG reporting. Now, this again is becoming very popular in the European scheme of things. You see CSRD over here. So in Europe, it is very popular, as I said. IFRS, I think the one which all of us are very, very familiar with. We accountants, absolutely love IFRS, right? So IFRS very recently, I don't know how many of you know this, but I think in June 2023, they came out with sustainability specific accounting standards. If you're not aware about it, I think, please go Google it out and say IFRS S1 and S2. It will tell you sustainability specific accounting standards that, let's say organizations are expected to actually follow. Yeah. In a way, SASB, or the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, is kind of a subsidiary of GRI. They work very very closely with each other. So the alignment is absolutely very clear in terms of, how, let's say, ESG reporting from a stack where SASB or a GRI is actually followed. Lastly, CDP, again, just like, how you saw in the case of TCFD, this very specifically speaks about the carbon disclosure, which means it covers the nuances only around the environment side of things. So let's say if an organization which is into, I don't know, maybe oil or let's say marine industry, for example, somebody which is very specific, which has got a direct linkage to climate one way or the environment one way or the other, they might actually choose this, yeah, and probably, start reporting on their ESG journey. I also want to take a minute on, let's say, the alignment of GRI as well as SDG. India, I think, the most common perception worldwide is the fact that, we are not very clean, yeah, because, and thanks to, films like, Slumdog Millionaire, they're not really doing, they're not really helping the cause, yeah, in terms of, where we are from a cleanliness point of view. But nevertheless, we are actually, rapidly changing as a country. There's a cleanliness drive, which is actually now all along, but a lot needs to be done, right? That's where SDG comes into the picture. From an Indian context, I thought that, the alignment with SDG 6, which is clean water and sanitation, which is reporting on water usage and management, because, today I think water is becoming a scarce commodity. You go to remotest of the places, I think till very recently, even a place like Bangalore, where I reside, we had issues this summer, when it came to actually water. And what are we actually doing as an individual or as an enterprise? There is very limited understanding of, what we need to do from a clean water and sanitation point of view. this is where the onus lies not just on the enterprises, but on us as individuals as well, right? I keep telling in fact, when we took up the ESG adoption about 2 or 3 years back, we used to joke that, when I actually consume only 1 bucket of water when I actually shower, and I don't actually use the shower, yeah, because, you end up actually, when consuming a lot of water. But these days it is a reality. What started off as a joke, I think, today we are, if we don't do this today, one way or the other, if you're not going to conserve this, as I said at the start of the slides, eventually what ESG is, how are you ensuring that your future generation has got the same access to natural resources the way you have today? And we have certain responsibility today towards, let's say, our future generation. Otherwise, they're going to perish. We won't be there, but they are going to they will have to bear our, let's say, the brunt of our doings or wrongdoings. Yeah. Similarly, SDG 13 is the most common or the most globally adopted, let's say, sustainable development goal, which is climate action, which is disclosing carbon emissions and mitigation strategies. We speak about pollution. I think in Bangalore, there are a few corners, where we have started emitting or disclosing that, what is our pollution levels, in different areas. Yeah. Not that, we are doing anything significant at this point of time, but nevertheless, I think it is a first step, and there's a long way to go. And I'm assuming that, most of the other cities are also, probably doing one thing or the other from their contribution point of view. SDG number 8, a lot to do with, let's say, the social side of things when it comes to decent work and economic growth. As I said, the common perception worldwide is that, when it comes to ESG, is the fact that, it's everything to do with environment. No, if you remember the first slide, I think at least about 60% of what ESG is actually all about has got to do with people as well. Yeah. I'll take some questions before I move to, I think, the last couple of slides that we have. Yeah. I need to understand biodiversity as merged. This is a little too specific. Can I take this at end or maybe offline, Chindu, because I've got a couple of more slides to cover?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Thank you. Now we have understood, what GRI is actually all about. Now we have spoken about all the good things. We have understood. We have learned something new. Or I would expect that, at least, some of you have understood that, what I'm trying to tell you over here. But let us also see that, what kind of challenges that you would see from a GRI adoption point of view. Yeah. The first challenge, although on one side I told you that, data is absolutely important, but trust me, today it is a challenge. Organizations who are wanting to embark on an ESG journey at some point of time, they face this bottleneck and say that, how do we get this data? Either the data resides in multiple data sources, or the data is not there. The data is absolutely not there. The easiest example that I can give you is, let's say if I take a flight from here to, let's say, Bombay. Yeah. Now, in the whole, let's say, scheme of things, what I do, I, let's say, hire a Uber. I get down to the airport. I take lifts. I take the escalators. I take the elevators. I take the flight itself, which is emitting, let's say, a humongous amount of, let's say, air pollution or carbons. And then again, when I get down, the same, let's say, cycle repeats, and then I come back again. Correct? Which organization do you think today has got this particular data? It's one of the easiest examples for me to actually, tell you so that you're able to relate to it, right? So like this, there are multiple challenges, which organizations will be actually facing or are already facing, but there are answers. The answer is you need to have, let's say, automation tools in place. If there is no placeholder available today, you will have to create the placeholder one way or the other, so that, you are actually complying with the whole ESG, let's say, framework / guidelines / standards. Yeah. So data collection becomes the biggest, let's say, challenge that you have. Materiality assessment, although it sounds great, inclusivity, including external people, including internal people, fabulous. But is it that easy? The answer is no. Because again, for us, even if you, first of all, to, let's say, compile the questions, come out with, let's say, all the thought process around it itself is a problem, number one. Manageable problem. I'm not saying that it is an acute problem. Number two, assuming you have 100 questions in place, you send out beautiful questionnaires, how are you going to ensure there are responses which is coming back? Will all suppliers, customers abide to your, let's say, this thing? But do they have time to actually do this for you? Time will tell, right? But you will have to engage the stakeholders, one way or the other, right? So there is no go or there is no two ways about it. It's a no-brainer. Obviously this needs to be done. Large organizations, in fact, I wouldn't say even small organizations, even large organizations are finding it difficult today because whether we like it or not, there is a silent recession of sorts, which is looming large at this point of time. Or it is already there. I don't know. Maybe you are the financial experts over here. I don't realistically come from a finance industry anymore, besides my CA degree. So having said that, people are still being pushed to adopt ESG strategy, which means the great question of, who's going to do it? Whose responsibility is this, right? Do the organizations have budgets today to appoint a full-fledged sustainability team? The answer is no. Can they load this on their existing set of people? Is it as easy to do that? Again, the answer is no, right? There is a very delicate balance, that let's say any enterprise or any organization is actually expected to have and ensure that they are actually augmenting or having an answer to a problem like this. One of the solution is to implement this in a phased approach. Rather than actually taking everything at one shot, you probably fragment your problems. It's like looking at one problem as a whole problem, right? Instead of that, you might as well fragment it and ensure that you're tackling those problems one after the other. Yeah. I think this probably is a last but one slide. I think some of you would have heard about this before. What exactly is, let's say, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. In fact, today we are speaking about scope 4 as well. Yeah. Even before we go to what is actually scope 4, it is absolutely important for all of us to understand what exactly scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 is. Because as I said today, fortunately, unfortunately, anybody who speaks about ESG is speaking about environment, whether you like it or not. Yeah. So in that context, let's say any organization, let's say one of your clients or you yourself, if you're a manufacturing organization, for example, what are you doing for, let's say, your production processes? What you do is actually, you're burning fuel, right? You're burning, let's say, gas, for example, or you're probably buying oil for your, let's say, existing scheme of things. So that gets clubbed under scope 1. Scope 2 is something, which is indirect. Let's say, electricity, let's say steam, or any heat or any cooling agents that you actually purchase for your production processes, for example. I'm just giving you a hypothetical example. Maybe you don't come from that particular industry, but imagine a manufacturing unit. So what is direct for them is this, what is indirect for them is this, basically, right? Anything else beyond scope 1 and scope 2 becomes a scope 3. The example which I gave you about the flight which I actually took is a classic example of, let's say, scope 3 emissions. And today, the whole world is actually grappling, saying that, how do we get data for scope 3? Scope 1 and scope 2 is still easy because, one way or the other, the enterprises or the organizations, they already have this data. But scope 3 is where the challenge is. The scope 3, again, is actually broken down into upstream as well as downstream, right? While we are grappling this now, already there is avoidable, non-avoidable emissions, in the form of scope 4, which is getting discussed. And if any of you are sustainability enthusiasts, and if you're following the recently held COP28, or let's say the upcoming COP29, which is going to happen. COP is basically the conference of parties, right? Where the world economic, let's say the worldly leaders come and actually discuss, let's say, few pointers. One of the biggest pointers that they're actually discussing today is with respect to, let's say, scope 3, scope 4 emissions. Basically, ESG is taking precedence, let's say, worldwide. Yeah. Because anybody who speaks about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, this is a very ESG specific terminology. Yeah? This is just a takeaway for all of you to actually understand. I come to my last slide. What we did today was, basically understanding of, let's say, or scratching the surface when it comes to GRI as a framework. A little bit of understanding about, let's say the alignment on BRSR. I want you to take away the fact that, your organization, if they are following BRSR, urge them to actually, adopt GRI as well, because GRI is a little more holistic as well. GRI in combination with BRSR is a great globally visible ESG strategy. It will send out a great messaging for, let's say, your overseas partners, vendors, customers, whoever you're actually dealing with. It integrates well with your business strategy. I think the slide where you saw the CEO, CFO, CIO, CTO, or let's say the COO, you would have understood that there is something for everybody over there. It means that the ESG strategies, along with the ESG founding principles, if it is well adopted, I think it will definitely translate into better ROI over a period of time, because you may not see this in year zero, but we all will have to be a little patient. It was like that, let's say early advent of ERP implementations. The thought process was that, your P&L and balance sheet, you might have, let's say, just a button on your keyboard saying P&L. The P&L comes out. That is not the case, right? So it has taken some time for ERPs to actually, get cemented, get stabilized. And today we are seeing the need that, ERPs or any other software or accounting software are becoming only repository of data. For you to have meaningful, let's say, reporting and dashboards and analysis, you need analytics in place, correct? So that is where, let's say, the whole world is actually, heading towards to. It builds a lot of stakeholder trust internally as well as externally. You go and tell your customer or your vendor saying that, this is what you're actually doing. It tells that, you are regulatory complying with, what, let's say, somebody like a SEBI is actually telling you to do, or somebody, let's say, let's say a global regulatory body telling you to do, right? It leverages technology. I think we have covered enough on this particular bit. And again, to summarize, in terms of streamlining your data collection, your data management, and ensuring real-time reporting, right? Because your ESG placeholders or your ESG softwares need to have this data coming and sitting in your platforms. That is when the ESG software or your ESG tools can convert this data into ESG metrics or matrices. Yep. Learning from the Indian leaders, I think, Tata, Mahindra, I think I missed out ICICI over here, I see. Please take a look at their website, go and see. I think the Indian diaspora is doing a huge, let's say, initiative. They have taken a giant leap of faith. They're doing their extreme best in terms of ensuring that, they are putting, let's say, these strategies in place and trying to interweave this in their business strategy. So any of these ESG reports, if you take a look, if you spend some time, read it with some patience, I think you will understand, what exactly this is all about. Yeah. The future of sustainability reporting, I think it is ever expanding. I think ESG is not just limited to environment. It is going to, let's say, be a little beyond on the social, on the governance side of things. Although, let's say, many of these frameworks, although many of these economies are focusing on climate-related disclosures first, but eventually this will start percolating onto the other scheme of things as well. With that, I conclude my session. I think we'll have some questions.
Yes, sir. We are short of time. Can we share the questions with you and you just provide us the draft on it? Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Kaushik, sir, for your insightful presentation on GRI.
Just one last thing. Just one last thing, Chindu. This is my LinkedIn QR code. People who are actually interested to connect, they're welcome to scan this and probably connect with me. I'll be happy to stay connected.
Yes, sir. Anybody who wants to, connect with Kaushik, sir, they can just scan this QR code and they can connect with him. Also, sir, this is a very insightful session of today's, and we get a valuable knowledge on GRI, and I think everybody is, just stuck to the screen only for this comprehensive topic, which is very crucial in today's time. And we are thankful to you, sir, for sparing your valuable time for us and enlightening us with your insightful session. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Now I request, now I request Mr. Tejas to deliver a vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
As we
you.
conclude today's enriching session, we extend our heartfelt thanks to our speaker, C.A. Kaushik Mahadevan, sir, for their insightful presentation on navigating GRI standards in India. We would also like to express our sincere gratitude to our chairperson and vice chairman of the Reporting Standards Board for their individual guidance and support in organizing this webinar. Furthermore, we extend our appreciation to all participants who have actively engaged in the discussion and contributed to the overall success of this event. Now, together, we have taken significant steps towards promoting sustainable practices and building a more resilient future. Thank you all for your participation. Stay informed and continue your journey towards sustainability excellence by joining us in the future webinar. And our next webinar is scheduled on 22nd October 2024, which will be on building a sustainable future, the role of green finance in business. Stay connected and take care. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Really appreciate this. Thank you, Chindu. Thank you.
Everyone
Really
connected.
appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.